Hello, everyone. Perfect timing for me to lose my voice just as we're headed into Infertility Awareness Shabbat, but excited that we get to be here today on Alive. We're about to be joined by our clinical consultant, Dvora Entin, who's going to speak to us a little bit about what it means to support family and friends who are going through infertility. And just 1 second as she joins. Oh no. Why is it not working? There we go. And it's working. Hooray.
It's working. Hello. How are you?
I'm good. I have a little bit of a voice left. Perfect.
I heard. Unbelievable. Yeah, too much yelling at your family, right? That's the thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's the greatest time to get sick, right?
Amazing. Feel better. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Yes, likewise. Anyways, let's talk a little bit about Infertility Awareness Shabbat, but before we do that, just in case there's anyone left in this community who does not know the incredible Devorah, would you take a minute just to introduce yourself to those few people?
Sure. So I'm Devorah Entin. I am a licensed clinical social worker and a specialist in reproductive and perinatal mental health. I live in Philadelphia and love that I can work virtually with many different communities and organizations and people who struggle within these realms. So I'm a clinical consultant with Yesh, Tikva, and have been a part of this team for a good number of years already. And I'm privileged to be here in that capacity and to be talking about things that are really important. And I'm glad that we are especially addressing these issues as we are launching right before Pesach, right before an incredibly sensitive time for people who are struggling to have children or to grow their families. So thank you, Gila, for doing this today and making the time for it.
Of course, and thank you for joining us. And hopefully my voice will hold out for this one. Let's start with the first question. Why is it important for us to speak about infertility within the Jewish community?
I think that to me, the winds are shifting. I do believe the winds of conversation and what we talk about publicly and what we have never talked about publicly are shifting with time. And I would say historically, there were many conversations that we just were not comfortable having. We were not comfortable talking about infertility. We were not going to ever talk publicly about pregnancy loss. We definitely weren't going to talk about genetic issues or the older single who does not yet have a family or freezing eggs. All of these issues that we just didn't talk about it. And I think that that's something where we are kind of pushing those boundaries enough that we are opening this space to have conversations around hard things. And the reason I think that's so important is because when we have these conversations about hard things, we decrease isolation. Somebody says, oh, I'm not the only person who has experienced this. Like, I'm not the only one who has gone through secondary infertility, or I thought there's nobody I have ever met who has had a miscarriage. And so those are the kinds of things that the more we talk about it, the more space that we create around these conversations, that we decrease isolation, and ultimately decreasing isolation, increasing awareness also is going to increase access to care. And I think that that's ultimately one of the goals, is that, I didn't think it was such a big deal. I'm going to wait until I'm, 3-4 years married before I finally get the help that I need, versus saying, we have a problem a year out, and how am I going to get the help that I need? So it doesn't kind of persist and become a bigger problem or a bigger challenge.
Definitely, and so important. And I think just to kind of piggyback on that, from the perspective of emotional support, we sometimes get this pushback, but I know someone who's going through infertility. If I speak about it, I might offend them. Can you speak to why that isn't the case and why it's actually supportive to speak about it?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you made that a specific comment, because just this morning I was on the phone with a Rav who reached out to me, and he said, I'm thinking about doing something for he actually didn't even know it was Infertility Awareness Shabbat weekend. And I said, well, you happen to be calling me on a weekend just a few days before. Would you be willing to say a few words from the pulpit? This was talking about a future program. I said, but if you kind of can engage in the conversation now, you're joining a group of another 120, 130 communities across the country and across the world that are engaged in this public conversation. And that was exactly his question. Do you think that if I get up in front of the pulpit and I, without kind of warning, say a few words about infertility, am I catching my audience off guard, and could it be hitting a sensitive space for those that are in struggle? And of course, that comes from an incredibly sensitive and compassionate place. And I want people to be thinking that way. I want people to be that kind of Rav who's saying, am I going to hurt somebody by bringing that up? And my answer, well, all of our answers to these situations are going to be like, most of the time, right? There's no way for me to say 100% of the time, this is the right way to do things. But what we do know is that most of the time, people who struggle with infertility are asking to be seen. Do you remember me? Do you remember that I'm going through this? Have you thought about what Yontif means to me as a couple who does not yet have children? Have you considered what Yontif looks like and feels like with only one 5-year-old when everybody around us has young children saying, the Manishtana, and I'm the youngest at the table in my family? Like, what does it mean to be a person struggling to have a family as Yontif approaches? And so we talked it through. We talked about how do we embrace it? How do we even maybe a little bit broaden the conversation to include others who are isolated or others that are kind of feeling very left out of the Pesach experience or the Seder experience. But ultimately, I believe that with good sensitivity and kindness and compassionate words, that without looking at the person in the room who might be struggling, you can engage in these conversations publicly. The other thing that I asked the Rav to say, and he was masking completely, was we also should remind people not to make assumptions about the people you're interacting with. I had that experience where I made an assumption that somebody was struggling with infertility and actually they were struggling with mental health. And I goofed. I missed it. It was my earlier years, right? I missed it. I made an assumption that the reason they didn't have more children was because they were struggling with infertility. And I approached and I said, I'm here to talk to you. I'm here to talk with you, or I'd be supportive in whatever way. And she very graciously said, that's not my problem. Like, I'm dealing with something else. And so I learned an important lesson. Don't assume that this family who only has 2 children are struggling with infertility, or this family that doesn't have any children yet are struggling with specifically with infertility, etc. So just being mindful of being compassionate and present with those that are in struggle.
Amazing. So eloquently said. The final question that we're going to end off with is, and this is more geared towards everyone watching today and who will watch in future, is that what are 3 ways that we as individuals, so not from the communal level, but from the individual one-on-one level, can support a friend, family member who's going through infertility? I hear from a lot of people, like, it feels like I'm walking on eggshells. And I know that's meant to be a derogatory comment from those people, but to kind of add into this, how do we make that the positive? Like, it's okay to walk on eggshells.
Yeah, I was going to say, so walk on eggshells. It's not that painful. You know what I mean? Like, is it so hard to be sensitive, right? I once had a conversation with somebody who said to me, but like, okay, so now I have to be like sensitive with everything and everyone and everything that I say. I'm like, isn't that who we're supposed to be? Aren't we supposed to be Rachmanim and Baishanim? Like, aren't we supposed to be the community of people who are overly compassionate? Would that be the worst thing in the world if we were hypersensitive? I recently had a conversation. I was recently at my own Shabbos table, and somebody was talking about V'higadat lebincha, and with like an overemphasis. And there was somebody at my table who was not married, and I kicked the person who said it under the table, and that person immediately stopped talking and understood immediately what I was saying. Like, I want us to have that heightened level of, do I need to talk about this conversation? Do I need to, would it be so bad? Let's start with that. Would it be so bad if I was hypersensitive? Yeah, be hypersensitive. May I always be that person who's overly sensitive and compassionate. Let's start with that. I would like to say like a few ideas that I think are manageable. Mm-hmm. The first one is being mindful of your conversations, especially when you're sitting around your Yontif meals with your siblings, your cousins, the people who you say, I'm sure they don't mind when I kvetch about my newborn. I mean, everybody kvetches about their newborn. Just because they don't have kids yet doesn't mean they don't understand how tired I am, right? Like, can I lift up my level of awareness in the conversations that I'm having at my dinner tables? Do I really need to talk about Higadat lebincha when somebody is sitting at the table that does not have children? Do I really have to focus on how exhausted and tired and overwhelmed I am with my newborn baby? And am I alert to the pain that it would cause somebody if I said, oh, do me a favor, hold my newborn for me. Oh, I'm so tired, hold the baby, to the person who doesn't yet have children? So be aware. Start with awareness. Start with, gosh, like, I once had somebody say to me, but like, come on, like that's who we are. Like we're young married couples and we talk about our babies and we talk about our labors and we talk about our deliveries. Like that's our lives. And I just was kind of like a little bit speechless, to be honest with you. I was kind of going, okay, and I still look back at that conversation with a little bit of like shock and saying that might be true, but to say that in front of somebody who does not have children, to say that in front of somebody that had said it in front of somebody who had never had children and she was married for over 25 years, like, is that really what we're supposed to be having? Is that really what is going to bring us, good things into our lives? Like to be that person who's like, well, I'm sorry, this is what we talk about. That might be, but can it be the thing that I talk about with the people who have children versus the people who do not? So when I'm sitting at my dinner table, can I please be aware, at my Seder table, at my Yontif meal, can I be aware and alert of what are those conversations? And if the conversation is exclusively trending towards children and newborns and babies and labors and deliveries, can I turn to that couple and say something honest and open about their lives? Tell me, what's that new project you've been working on at work? I heard there was a new grant that was offered in the organization. What happened with that? Or, so what's your work schedule like these days? Are you working from home or are you working in the office? Are you virtual? Are you in person? And do you guys have any trips planned? Like, is there any kind of vacation coming up in the summer? What are your summer plans? Or are you going to get away for a couple of days? Or like, what was, did you have a good cleaning lady? I don't know, find something that is meaningful enough and acknowledges that they are valuable members of your family and community, and they have something to offer in conversation, even if they don't have children. And be that person that invites them into these spaces, welcomes them and is kind enough to them in these sensitive spaces that they feel comfortable. So number one, I would say be mindful, alert, knowledgeable about about the conversations that you are having. Number two, which is, I want to bring up one like small point because it always stuck with me as like I never thought of that. But Gila, we have had conversations before where we've had women who have said to us in our support groups, could you please not depend on me to clear the table just because I don't have the privilege of going to feed my baby? I had a mom who said like she was pregnant and she lost the pregnancy, and she said to me, I thought this was the year I was going to be nursing my baby during Magid and getting a break from the table. And I have to sit at the entire Seder because I don't have the privilege of going to feed my baby or putting my toddler to sleep. And so part of that like pain is also acknowledging what it means for them to be the one who's always being dependent on to help mom in the kitchen, or, well, she'll help clear the table because we have to go put the little ones to bed. Right? And so kind of, can we just be aware, alert of what it means to be without children at a Yontif meal, and just being kind of conscientious around that relationship at our table. The other thing, another piece that I think is kind of a little bit of a broader awareness, a broader concept, is to become knowledgeable about what it means to go through infertility. Be knowledgeable. Don't think that you know it unless you actually know it. Do some research, read some blogs, watch some Insta lives, learn what it means to be in the struggle of infertility, so that if a friend shares it with you, you aren't going, wait, IVF, what? I don't know what that is. You might say, oh, I'm familiar with that. Wow, that must be taking so much of your time in your day. Or, wow, I know how expensive that is. That must be so difficult. Or, I'm so grateful that you shared that with me because I know that I'm appreciative that you shared that information with me. Thank you for letting me know. And then the third component of being aware is also being willing and ready to continue to engage with that person about what they are going through. So somebody confided in you, the expectation is that you will follow up with them in some capacity. You will be making statements, not questions. You are not going to say to them, hey, how did the IVF go? Right? Or how did that round go? Or how are the meds? I might say, how are you feeling? I know that you're taking medication this week, or you had mentioned that you've got lots of shots. How are you handling it? How are you tolerating it? Or can I bring you some ice cream? Right? Or like, if you're really good friends with them, you could say, how sore is your butt when it comes to, the shots that you've got to take if you're really close with them, right? Don't do that to the regular average person. But I might say to them, how are you holding up? Or, I just want you to know I'm thinking about you this week. You've been on my mind. Or, I'm heading out to Starbucks. I'm grabbing you a cup of coffee. You want sugar or cream? Right? Or I'm going into the grocery store. I'm heading out to the shop. I'm grabbing you a roll of sushi, raw or fresh, right? Raw or cooked. can I just show up and say, I'm leaving it at your door, it's there, bye, I gotta go, I can't stay, that the person doesn't have to present themselves pretty and put on a pretty face, but they can just be seen and know that this is my friend who keeps showing up for me via text message, via a cup of coffee, via a bowl of soup, via just an awareness that this is a rough week for me. And in the 2 weeks of waiting, you also, and you also have to continue to show up. And the 2 weeks of devastation when it doesn't work, you also have to continue showing up. I think that always when we engage in these capacities, we also have to kind of sometimes ask permission. Is it okay with you if I text? Do you mind? I want to be respectful of your boundaries. Are you okay if I continue to text you and just kind of check in on how you're doing? And respect someone who says, actually, you really don't have to. It's okay. And I might say, is it okay if would you mind if I do? Because it's meaningful to me that you shared this information with me. And in that case, you could say, you don't have to respond. You do not feel, please do not feel obligated to respond to my text. It's purely a matter of you knowing that I'm thinking of you. You're in my heart. I know that you're going through a challenging time and you shouldn't have to go through it alone. So those are just some like kind of snippets of conversation, snippets of perspective when it comes to supporting people through infertility.
And we got a question in the chat while you were saying these. It referred to the first of the points, and they asked, what happens if someone shares a pregnancy announcement at the table?
Okay, so I'm going to suggest as follows. That is incredibly insensitive, bottom line. So if you are sitting at a table with people who do not have children, please do not make a pregnancy announcement at the dinner table. It's not the right place or time. If somebody does, and you are the sensitive person at the table who notices that couple that are sitting next to you that have been married for 3 years and do not have children, pull her into the kitchen. Be subtle and just look at her and say, I don't know, but that might have hurt, and I'm sorry that just happened to you. Acknowledge it. Just put your hand on her arm and look her in the eye and say, I wish that had not just happened, because boy, was that painful. That was painful for me to hear that just kind of done without any sensitivity. That person might look at you and be like, no, I'm fine. I'm good. Nah, it's all good. We don't have the time. And let her save face that way. That's okay. But if you know that you're gathering up families together, I will bring awareness to that issue to the people that are at my dinner table. So I might have several couples over, and I might say to one of the couples who has children, I'm letting you know that X and Y person will be joining us. I know they struggle to have children. Just be mindful in our conversations, right? Just be mindful. Or please don't say anything to them about, whatever it is. So let's be mindful in how we talk about things around our dinner table. And please, if you're listening to this and you've been blessed with a family and children, don't make pregnancy announcements in front of people who do not have children, like not in a public space. That's its own Insta Live of how we make pregnancy announcements to tell people that we're pregnant when they are struggling with having their own family.
And that was very, very important. And I think that in this space, I think that we think a lot about those who are struggling and those who are trying to support them. And I think that the point in what you're saying is that you're not supposed to not enjoy that you're pregnant, and you're not supposed to not share and talk about your families. I think that the most important piece that you shared in this, and the point that I want to make sure we highlight, is that it's a time and place. Yeah. So it's not a no but, it's a yes and. Yes, talk about it. Talk about your children. Find someone to complain to about them, because we all need that. As does the person who's struggling need to find the community of people who understand them to vent about the process of trying to grow their families. But being mindful that when you are in a setting with different people, your words, your actions, they impact people.
They matter.
Yes. Yeah. And we should be mindful of them.
Yeah.
And so
Gila, I once attended a lecture by Rabbi Crone, and I loved his line. It was one of my favorite lines ever. And he said something about, like, who's the one person, the only person who really cares about your advancement in your career, the only person who wants to hear about your reward, the one person who wants to hear about your success and your family, your mother, and nobody else. And his point was, like, he was talking about bragging and being kind of like a little bit like self-promoting. And the point being, like, when it comes to these things that you want to share your excitement, your celebrations, you want to be so proud of me. If you're blessed to have a parent who's living, talk to your parents. If you don't have a parent, then talk to your sibling. If you don't have a sibling, then find the best friend that you know that you can trust with this information. But I think we I have seen it like kind of developing with people who I so deeply respect, who, for example, that they might not be struggling in one area of life, but if I'm struggling in that area, they have become sensitive to that. And I'm noticing that sensitivity that exists in these very kind and good people. And I'm just going, oh, they're doing that. They've learned that lesson along the way. Somebody taught them, where they intuitively knew to be more sensitive about this conversation with me. And what a gift that is in a relationship. And I think that when we become those people who are sensitive and alert to and compassionate, then we welcome more people into our circle. Our circle expands, and we
Definitely
find places for many people.
Yes, and I think that kind of ties very beautifully and into our theme of this year's Infertility Awareness Shabbat of empathy. And I think that the important piece about empathy is that I don't need to have gone through what you experienced to be empathetic. I need to understand emotions and the ability to be mindful of them and to tap into what one might experience there. And I think that it gives us so much space to really support people around us, even if we've never experienced infertility.
Yeah. I think, there was one thing I saw recently that I thought was so startling to me, and not something I'd ever considered before. I recently attended a funeral. And as the grieving parents walked to...
You got off. You still there?
Are we back? Are we here?
You are back. You're good. You're here.
Yes, it was a phone call.
Okay.
Not sure how to figure that one out. But one of the things that I noticed, there was this grieving parents who were walking back from the funeral to their car. And it was a horrific burial of a child. And the parents walked through, and the Rav had said, everybody stand in 2 rows, create a shura, in which these parents will walk between us, and we all say Hamakom Yenachem Yischem. That is our minhag, right? We have a minhag. We say Hamakom Yenachem Yischem b'soch shav leitzion b'Yerushalayim, and you walk between these 2 pathways of parents, two pathways of your community, of your friends, of your supporters. And I thought to myself, is that not the definition and the image of I will stand beside you? I literally will stand beside you as you grieve. I will stand beside you as you struggle. I will stand with you in your pain. And, this is Chazal who taught us to do this. We have an obligation to put words out there, but even just the visual of standing beside people who are grieving, who are hurting, is the essence of empathy. Just stand beside me. Right? We come to old Uncle Mike, she sang, stand beside me and be my friend. That is, to me, was such a visual of Imo Anochi B'Tzara. I will stand in your pain together with you. I cannot fix this. There's nothing I can do to make this better, but I will stand beside you. And what an incredibly powerful image that was.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful imagery of what this is. And I thank you so much for coming on Instagram with me today so that we can talk a little bit about this. It's incredible that we are in our 7th year of Infertility Awareness Shabbat, that there are over 100 shuls and communities and Yoetzet initiatives and just community members who are pulling together events to make sure that we are normalizing the conversation around this so that we continue to grow our empathy and we continue to understand and have that knowledge base so that we could support family and friends who are going through it. And as you said, give people access to care. The more we talk about it, the more we normalize it, the more we can seek out the help that we need. So thank you so much.
Yes, and check out the Tikva Talks. Check out our videos that are posted. If you want to learn more about what it means, go onto our website, check out the resources that exist there, check out our interviews that are there. Immerse yourself and pick one story of what it means to be living in the aftermath or in the experiencing of infertility, and learn from the voices of those that have been there. So,
Definitely.
take care, everybody. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.